Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño and today we're discussing Canon's bold move to piss off almost every Canon shooter. For those of you that are not aware yet, Canon basically contacted Viltrox via, I guess it was some kind of a formal statement, and asked them to remove the lens that they had produced for the Canon RF mount. If you follow Canon and the RF mount, which is the latest mount, you'll know that only Canon lenses exist for this mount. So people were very happy to see that a company like Viltrox, which has been making lenses for a while and makes lenses for almost every other mount, started making lenses for the RF. That was going to give us some options. But it turns out Canon shot them down. And in a formal statement said, you must pull all lenses that you have in the market off the stands and no more sales for these lenses. Now what we know so far, as of the date of the filming of this video, is just that, right? We don't know if Canon is going to release any other statements to other companies. We don't know if this is temporary, right? Many times companies will release a patent, they'll wait for a while, and then they'll open it up to the rest of the world, right? The competition. I wouldn't be surprised if Canon's waiting for a couple of years while the RF mount, makes a little money for them, and only their lenses are being sold right now. And then maybe they'll trickle it out, like maybe letting Sigma and Tamron, maybe Tokina, make some lenses, because they've been making lenses, third-party lenses, for a very long time, right? And Sigma makes actually lenses for their own cameras, so they're a first-party company as well. Maybe after that, a couple of years of that, they'll open it up to the rest of the world, right? Lens manufacturers. So we don't know. These are the things we don't know. But for now, we know that Canon basically shut the door and said, no RF mount lenses from anybody but us. Before we get into the meat of this video, I want to do two things. One is, please go get your water. You know we always do this and I've been forgetting lately. Get hydrated. Take care of yourselves. The second thing I want to do is I want to discuss who might not really care about this news, right? Let's get that out of the way first. So if you're one of these people, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's right. What am I doing here? And we'll catch you up on the next video. Non-Canon shooters, right? Non-Canon shooters that don't plan to be Canon shooters really don't care. Now, if you're a non-Canon shooter that's been looking at the Canon mounts, and RF is one of them, right? The latest one, and you're thinking about getting like an R6 or an R5 or an R3, or even one of the crop sensor cameras like the R7 or the R10. Maybe this is going to scare you off. So in that case, you do care. But who doesn't care? Well, if you're not a Canon shooter and you don't plan to be a Canon shooter, then this news is just interesting. It doesn't really mean much. The other person that won't care is the person that I used to be. And this is the Canon shooter that only uses Canon glass, right? For the longest time, when I started out, I bought a Vivitar lens. We're talking back in the film days, right? Vivitar 1, which was like their upscale glass for FD mount for Canon back then. And after that, if I could afford to buy the Canon glass, I only bought Canon glass. And for that mount, I only had Canon glass. I bought the first digital camera, the EOS 10D, and I started buying professional glass from Canon for that, and I mean the L series glass, right? And I accrued a bunch of lenses. My brother gave me a 35mm f1.4 L series, so I just kept building the L series glass and good Canon glass until I woke up one day and had a change of heart. But back to my point. I shot only Canon lenses, and I started to realize that there were companies like Sigma and Tamron that make, first of all, they make lenses that are either just as good for half the price or just a little, subpar to Canon's glass, right? And you might say, well, that means everything to me. Well, we have to ask ourselves, does it really mean that much, right? When I'm shooting a landscape, do I need edge-to-edge sharpness? If I'm shooting a portrait, where my subject is in the center, do I need edge-to-edge sharpness, right? Or would I be better off, instead of paying $1,600 for a lens, paying $800 and getting extreme sharpness in the center and for giving a little bit of vignetting and sharpness at the edges, right? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. And then it becomes really commonplace to let other companies make glass that's cheaper because it gives us more options, right? The other thing too is that Canon doesn't make every lens in the world, and these companies make things that Canon doesn't make. So further giving us flexibility. But all of this we're going to move into in a second. Right now, let's talk about, I think I have 4 points. Is it 4 points? Yeah, that's all that I came up with. I wasn't trying to become fancy with 5 or 3 or 10. I just, whatever came out, and it just happened to be 4 points. I know in the Asian culture, 4 is kind of like not the best number, but that's what I came up with. And the points I came up with are basically 4 points why people might be really upset that Canon is not allowing anybody else to come up with lenses for the RF mount. Number 1 is moolah. In other words, money. Money. You can spend a lot less money buying a Sigma, buying a Tamron, buying a Tokina, buying a Viltrox, buying a TT Artisan. Any lens that's made for your camera that satisfies your need, right? You don't always, and I don't always, we don't always need something that's 100% sharp all the time, everywhere, right? Sometimes a little softness is okay. So it just depends on what we're doing, what we need, who we're shooting for, what we're getting paid for, right? Or what we're doing as a hobby. I want to take a moment and I want to break down this third-party lens thing because I had a question. I said, wait a minute. So there's Canon glass and then there's third party. Whatever happened to second party? So I started looking all this up and I want to explain it. So OEM is original equipment manufacturer, right? So OEM is Canon. If you have a Canon camera, a Canon lens is OEM. It's an original part, right? If you have a Nikon camera, then the OEM is Nikon. We also refer to this as first-party lenses, first-party materials, first-party products, whatever, right? First-party accessories made by the same manufacturer. Third party is basically made by someone else, right? We call that third party. So if you own a Canon and you buy a Sigma lens, that's a third party lens, right? And if you buy a Tamron lens for a Nikon, that's a third party lens, right? So very straightforward. So whatever happened to second party? Well, I did read up that Apple coined the word, the phrase second party product for things that were designed by Apple but not made by Apple, right? And I get that because that happens in the phone world. They design these things and then they're made in China and other places. But in the lens world, that doesn't happen. Canon doesn't design a lens and then give it to somebody to make, right? It doesn't happen. So second party lenses really don't exist unless you want to call it something else. If you want to call, for example, I have the EF mount, a full frame, Canon camera, right? If I buy a different Canon lens, or say I buy a Canon lens for that camera and I want to use it on a different camera like my EOS M6 Mark II, maybe I'll call that second party because it is a Canon lens, but it's not made for that camera. It's made for other Canon cameras and I have to use an adapter. Maybe I'll call that second party. I'll let you decide what you want to call second party, but first party is OEM, made by the manufacturer itself, and third party is made by somebody else. Back to the point about money real quick. If you're shooting the RF mount, right, specifically the Canon R7 and the R10, and maybe the R8 later on, these are cameras that cost a lot less than the R5, R6, R3, R1, which is going to be coming out at one point. If you buy a camera that's $1,000, $1,500, you're probably not as crazy about spending money for RF glass as a person who bought like an R5 that has a 45 megapixel sensor and probably says, you know what, I want to buy Canon glass for this camera because I know it's going to work with a 45 megapixel sensor, right? So I could see that. But if you're buying like an R7 or an R10, right, it would be nice if you don't have to spend $3,000 or $2,000 on a lens. If you can get a lens from another manufacturer, like a small kit lens, right, for half the price of a Canon lens, right? So these are the people that are even more upset. The people that haven't bought into these cameras yet that are thinking about it, that know about this news, are thinking, wow, do I really want to do this? My friend, which owns an R6, is a wedding photographer. He just moved from the Nikon mount to Canon because Canon's doing really well with eye tracking and so many other things. And now he's asking if he made the right move. I assured him that I can't see Canon doing this for a very long time. Canon is a smart company. They're a big company. And I don't know that they would hurt themselves long term for making a quick profit right now, right? I'm sure, like I said earlier, they're probably just trying to wait it out, make as many lenses and sell as many RF lenses as they can before they open up the market to everybody else. Reason number two why people are pissed off about Canon not allowing third-party glass is basically flexibility or adaptability or variety, right? However you want to call it. And let me talk about that right now. As I stated before, Canon doesn't make every lens. I mean, it's just, the companies can't, right? They pick the lenses that they want to manufacture covering, the entire spectrum of the focal length. They look at some f-stops, right? Some apertures that might be interesting, like for a good portrait lens, a nice wide open aperture, like Canon's 85mm f1.2, beautiful lens. But they don't make everything, right? So for my M6 Mark II, a little, crop sensor camera, which is very small, great for street photography. I bought it specifically to record these videos. And then I bought a second one because I love it so much that I want one dedicated to street photography. I want to be burning the sensor out with videos. So that one's dedicated for street photography. This one's for videos. And if I ever need two for an interview or two cameras to record my video, then I'll use it for that, right? But the lenses are kind of, limited. Limited is a good word. I was going to say crappy, but they're not all crappy. A couple of them are. A couple of them are extremely sharp, right? And this is a 32 megapixel sensor, which equates, as I said earlier, to like a 52 megapixel sensor in the full frame world. So 50 to 52, 51, something like that. I forget. So you want other companies to make glass for your camera. Let me give you an example. I bought for $98 a TT Artisan 50mm f1.2 for that camera that's filming right now. I'm not using it right now. It's a manual focus only lens, but for many things I don't care. See, when I put that 50mm on this camera, I have to multiply by 1.6, so it becomes like an 80, right? And that becomes a beautiful lens for portraiture. And the fact that it's a 1.2, well, that has to be multiplied by 1.6 also. But it ends up being like a 1.9 or something. And that's still a wonderful lens because it's a close-up lens, right? 80mm. So, and portraits, manual focus for me is fine, right? People aren't moving around too much. It's a calm moment, basically. So Canon doesn't make that lens. First of all, they don't make any manual focus lenses for this. Now, their lenses have manual focus, and you might say, what? Just switch it to manual focus. Two things. When a lens is made for autofocus, manual focus is typically an afterthought, right? So how it manually focuses is not important. The fact that you have to spin and spin and spin and spin to focus it is very difficult for some photographers, right? Especially if they're doing video. And if you move too short and it focuses too quickly, that's bad too, right? Because you want some throw to find your focus point, but not too much throw and too little throw. So when you make a manual focus lens, this becomes incredibly important, right? So you want manufacturers making manual focus lenses if you care about these things, because Canon doesn't, right? Part two to that is, if you buy an autofocus lens, yes, you can use it on manual focus. I have done that. But as soon as I miss my first shot, I look and it's a little blurry, yeah, screw this, I'm going back to autofocus. Pop! I flick the switch. On this camera, it's a switch. And I go back to autofocus, and then I'm, doing the same thing. Anything wrong with that? No, I'm still creating nice pictures and, still happy doing what I do with the camera. But when I have a manual focus lens in my hand, I feel like photography is this beautiful hobby that I can just do all day and all night. It's beautiful focusing. It's one more step in the creative process. One less thing that I'm giving the camera the ability to do, right? Why don't I shoot in automatic? Because I want to select my own aperture, because I want to select my own shutter speed, because I want to select my own ISO. That's the beauty of going to digital. In the film world, you put film in and your ISO was fixed for the whole, roll. Now you can select that as well. Why would I want to do all that and autofocus when I can manual focus if I can? So if I'm shooting somebody sitting down, if I'm shooting still things, if I'm shooting landscapes, and a manual focus is okay, why not? If it's perfectly sharp, it's perfectly comfortable, they're made well, and the price is like a quarter of a regular lens in that lineup, why not? Reason number 3 for wanting other companies to make lenses for our cameras is character. Now, let me start by saying that that word is abused many times, right? Let me tell you what, to me, character is not. Character is not buying a lens, and I wish I had a lens here, right? I have my phone. It's not buying a lens and then it's totally out of focus most of the time, right? If it's an autofocus lens, it doesn't focus sharp all the time, it misses a few. That's not character. That's a poorly designed lens. I mean, there's no other way to call that, right? A lens that gives you chromatic aberration in every picture at every f-stop, you want to call that character? That's okay. I can't stop you from doing that. To me, that's a poor design. Poor coatings, poor glass element, design, selection. It's just a poor lens. So keeping aside those, poor designs, right, and poor lenses, I'm not talking about that. Let's talk about what character might mean for us. Let's take funky shaped bokeh, right? Bokeh is when you focus a picture, you focus on a subject. It could be a person. It doesn't have to be. The stuff behind it is out of focus, right? That's a shallow depth of field, basically. And when there are lights back there, those become known as bokeh or bokeh balls, right? And many times those are round, right? And if they're round and they're a little fuzzy, that's okay. If they're round and sharp, that's another characteristic. Sometimes they're a little, they start to look like cat eyes, right? And that's what they call them, cat eye bokeh balls. And then many times you can see the aperture blades of the lens in the bokeh balls, right? All of these things I would classify as character. If you're looking at a subject and there's a blurry background with some lights that are blurred out, and you look at one of those lights and the bokeh ball, you can see like a little star, or you can count like the aperture blades in it. You know what? That's not the end of the world. You don't always get that, so that would be a kind of a cool characteristic if your pictures had that and nobody else's did, right? Especially if they're kind of blurred and in the background. Personally, I can live with that. I wrote a little phrase, and I have to read it because I won't remember it. My memory's not that good anymore, although I'm trying to, keep it up, right? You can't get character from a lens that is trying to be perfect all the time. And that goes to the point about all the lenses being clinically sharp with the same coatings and the same design, rules, and made by the same designers, made by the same company. You want to vary a little bit. Other companies are going to give you different coatings and different designs and different blades and all kinds of things that are going to make your pictures look a little different. If you are like me, reach out to Canon, write them a note. Maybe I'll see if I can leave something at the end of this and then put something in the description, like a telephone number where you can contact Canon USA or Canon wherever you are. And maybe if you want to write them a letter or an email, I'll give you some information about that as well. And it doesn't have to be a rude letter. It doesn't have to be a nasty letter. It doesn't have to be a long letter. Just a simple, I've followed you for a very long time, or I'm interested in buying into your system. Please don't take third-party lenses away from us. Photographers depend on a variety of lenses, and this would be very helpful. This would keep me, focused on buying Canon in the future. Without this, I can't commit to the Canon system anymore. That's it. That's simple, okay? So I'm not telling you the words. I'm not even telling you have to do this. It would be nice if all of us did it, if Canon started receiving actual physical letters and they were opening letters, day and night, oh my gosh. I bet you they would have to do something quicker than not. And point number 4, why people are upset is that they've lost their individuality. Let's face it, in a world that's more the matrix and less common sense each and every day, where no one can think for themselves and everyone mimics everyone else, having something that not everyone else has can mean a great deal. Things like that I enjoy. I enjoy having things that not everybody else has. I can't stand that mentality, and that's the way the world has gone, is buy whatever everybody else has, right? I was never that person. So I'm not going to start being that person today. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to let you know about this news that has a lot of people upset. Give Canon a chance, right? Let's not jump to conclusions until we find the entire story out. But those are basically the 4 reasons why people are upset. I've talked to many of my friends that are now talking about switching, and I tell them don't talk about that yet. There's no need. Just give Canon a little minute to figure things out, and let's start reaching out to Canon and letting them know, right, that we're concerned, and that means a lot. Maybe we can turn things around a little sooner, as I mentioned before. So, if this was useful information, and this is something you can either share or that you got something from it, please like it below on your left, subscribe below on your right. Don't forget the notification bell when you subscribe so you get notified when new videos come along, and comment below in the comments. State a little something, whether you agree, disagree, if you're concerned or not, if you don't care, and let me know what you think. It's important. I always try to answer back. Sometimes it's a couple of weeks because I can't get around to it right away, but I always answer back. So looking forward to your comment. With that said, we have reached the end of our video. Thank you very much for staying around. Thank you very much for your time. Always, you're so appreciated. I wish you knew. Love you guys. Please stay healthy, and we will catch up in the next video. Ciao for now.